Welcome to Mad Men, a podcast dedicated to recapping and analyzing the AMC series Mad Men from the perspective of three wildly different types of watchers. We have somebody here who is watching the show for the very first time, somebody who is rewatching the show for the first time since the series was airing and ended back in 2015. And then there's me, Jon Negroni, who watches this all the time, as many times as Lane downs whiskeys in this episode. Joining me as always is Will Ashton, our first-time viewer. And Will, I'd buy you a drink if you wipe the blood off your podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is not a very chipper episode for Lane in a number of reasons, but
a lot of blood in this episode, period.
But if I have to say anything positive about Lane, it's that he drinks like a champ.
And of course, by the way, Will, of course, is downing some whiskey as he said that. Of course, we have Mike Overhulse, our first-time rewatcher. And Mike, I got a question I don't know how to phrase other than as a podcast. What are commissions and fees? Did you understand that? Did you get it? I've rewatched that scene so many times, and the commentaries they joke about it, it makes no sense to me. Not even a little.
It's what you get and what you give, Sometimes the love that you gave is equal to the love you get. My good friends told me that. I also might be in too goofy of a mood tonight to talk about suicide. God. I should have came in much more somber.
I think, I'm just going to say, I think oftentimes the more serious subject matters sometimes invite the goofier episodes to counterbalance the heaviness.
They make a joke out of the first time he tries to kill himself.
Right. Yeah, it's almost kind of funny, pathetic. It is funny, pathetic, I'd say, his first suicide attempt, especially him with his since broken glasses trying to figure out the muffler. That got a good laugh out of me.
Well, did you remember? Because I know we took a bit of a break, but 4 or 5 episodes ago, it's a thing that they talk about Jaguars doing that, not being these junk cars that won't start, and then it foreshadows itself so long ago.
I genuinely forgot, but I'm glad you reminded me because I'm glad they set that up a while ago.
Should Lane have been naked when he did it?
Of course, the answer is yes.
He was trying to inconvenience them and insult them. But he has a bit of pride, that man.
He should have just gone the David Carradine route and just had it, hog in hand.
Hog in hand?
Yeah, just...
This is off to a great start.
Oh my God. Okay, so today we're talking about Season 5, Episode 12, Commissions and Fees. This episode first aired June 3rd, 2012. It was written by Andre and Maria Jacques Metten, of course, longtime writers' room folks for Mad Men. This is the first episode directed by Christopher Manley. We've talked about Christopher Manley a lot, of course, in Mad Men, mainly because Manley has been a director of photography for the show for a long time. So it was super fun because there are 2 commentaries for this episode, like usual. One of them has Christopher Manley with Jared Harris, and he gets to kind of talk about directing the episode from the perspective of somebody who does, the cinematography. So that was actually super cool. We're going to get into our first reactions to the episode. And obviously we've already kind of touched on it. This is a heavy one. And I know it's going to be a little tricky to navigate, the tone, I guess. But I guess, it's worth pointing out that that's Mad Men. Mad Men's always been a very serious show that takes itself seriously to an extent, but it also has this comic irreverence throughout its entire run. And, Will, I'm sure up until this point, you have noticed that this is not a show that's afraid to crack a joke
Sure.
in the middle of a dramatic scene, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Obviously, both of these subject matters are fairly touchy and hard to deal with. But I don't know. I feel like it's easier to make light of, a character having suicidal ideation or suicide than sexual harassment, which is just not something I feel is really jokey. And I feel like having to discuss that last week and, I think we were pretty respectful and didn't deal with that. I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. It's not to say one is less serious than the other, but I don't know. I just feel like it's, I don't know. I don't know really where to go with that.
No, that's a really good point. I feel like the show desensitizes us like it did in the Times to what happened to women, because it's just over and over and over. And at certain times you're on Don's side when he's being an asshole and womanizing and doing all these things. So that's a really good point of why was this one why is a subject matter like this as irreverent or should be treated differently than the atrocities we literally watch in that, man, every fucking week.
Yeah, very true, very true. And Mike, I did want to ask you before We get Will's reaction to the episode. I mean, you had to watch this entire season again, knowing what's going to come, right? So did you notice a pretty big difference? Like while you were rewatching every episode leading up to episode 12, were you seeing all the death imagery? Because that's like the first thing that rewatchers notice, because like you don't really pick up on it. And obviously we weren't able to talk about it on the podcast for Will's benefit. But wow, there are so many references to what happens in this episode. Like there's like Lane talking about death, drawing the news. I mean, so many things.
100%. You know so much of it. And I think also it was like the time I was watching this, I was still younger. And so you just by knowledge of being younger and having less life experience, you don't really see something like that coming. Because there is just like, they start planting the seeds for this just so long ago in the series. And they're like very quick little scenes. And there's already so much turmoil and like stress. And I think also it's hard to equate like money back then. Like what was a big debt and what wasn't a big debt, because money amounts are just so different that, yeah, it just was not even on my radar the first time. So this time it was really, really just enjoyable to see the ratcheting, because there is so much. Like it's a very stressful thing knowing what's going to happen to Lane and watching this season.
Yeah, in the commentaries they mentioned they didn't even tell Jared Harris that this was coming until like I think he phrased it as like a couple of episodes before this. So Harris wasn't aware. They kept him in the dark. It's not clear for how long exactly, but yeah, obviously this is what they had in mind for the character, at least the beginning of this season, if not even before that. You even had that like, little line where he's like, I promise I'll make good by Easter, kind of hinting at like a resurrection. Like it's just dark joke after dark joke. But of course, Will, you are our first time watcher. We do have to start with the big thing. I'm curious what you thought of the episode overall, because there's a lot of other stuff that happens in this. Big Glenn and Sally episode, of course. We have the Dow Chemical pitch. We have Don kind of reacting to, you know, basically the class warfare that Lane brings up when he has to fire him. And then, of course, the main plot of Lane's death here. My first big question for you is, I mean, did you see it coming? And if so, like, at what point did it turn for you where you were like, you know, like, because obviously it's clear when he's going to the Jaguar to, you know, do the hose and everything like that. But yeah, how did you see it playing out?
I mean, if you had asked me at the beginning of the episode, I wouldn't have anticipated it. I think midway through, I kind of saw the writing was on the wall, as it were. I just kind of feel like Lane is someone who has been so proud and come from this very kind of starkly British kind of noble to a degree household. I feel like it's been set up, as you guys have mentioned early on, that he wouldn't really be welcome back home. There was this sort of isolated quality to him being an American, not only in the sense of like, I think he felt more comfortable here, but like I don't know, he was always sort of an outsider in some respect or another. He was the one, you know, British guy in the office. He was always keeping these secrets, things like that. He you know, was never really able to be someone like Dawn or Roger or anyone that fits into this kind of acclimated world. And it feels like him kind of being a partner even was something that kind of just, like a lot of things in a show, almost was happenstantial. So yeah, I mean, I that is all to say that I feel like the inherent tragedy of Lane's character was always sort of apparent, to the extent that I expected him to commit suicide, especially in like a penultimate episode, not even a finale, was I think kind of surprising. And I think more than anything, what surprised me was the bluntness that would come on with the imagery. Like I was kind of impressed early on with the, you know, how they handled it pretty delicately in the office. Like we mentioned before, there's something kind of tragic comedic about his first attempt in the Jaguar, but you know, the way that they initially address it, you know, we just see the chair on the ground, we don't see the body, we just kind of just know through reactions how it happened. But then when you see the cadaver, and not only that, but like they go to extra details to gray the skin and like show the burn marks on his neck, like things that I feel like most media doesn't really pay attention to in terms of the real details to really kind of add to the harrowing intensity and shock of it. I don't know. I mean, I can see maybe some people finding it insensitive, but I felt like it added to the starkness of the situation and then the way that this episode kind of deals with, you know, people play acting as adults and having to come into, you know, this sort of blunt reality, and obviously it's tragically so for Lane, but obviously we see it with Dawn, and then in a very literal sense with Sally. like with her period. But yeah, I mean, I think there is a sense of like these people, even though they've been adults and we've been really focusing on Dawn as like this middle age, that character of the last couple of seasons, it feels like this is almost sort of a turning point as far as like they're not children anymore. I think even what's his face?
Bert
Bert
says, like,
yeah,
you got to let the adults handle the business
Right.
or something. Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's like it really ties the episode together in a really intriguing and thoughtful way.
Yeah. So the exact line is, you can't keep being the good little boy while the adults run the business. Yeah. And it's obviously like another dressing down related to earlier in the season, where Don had been checked out, because of his honeymoon, love moon, whatever with Megan that Bert calls him out on. And this episode kind of is reckoning for that because he has the whole confrontation with Roger and he's talking to Roger about like, and Roger even says like, I like that guy I saw today, I miss him, he just, between the divorce, the fallout of that, and then of course, like, being with Megan, he took his eye off the ball and let Pete kind of swoop in. And now he's like, you know what, Roger, you and I, like together, we're a unit. Like, let's go out and win a $20 million account. Let's just do it. Right. And it's like, it's that part of the episode's fun to see. You're like, hell yeah, guys, let's get at it. Let's go. Can I come? But yeah, Mike, again, you did see this coming. I'm curious, like, how much of this episode did you really remember? Like, did you remember this is like where the Sally Glenn stuff was? Like, how did it hang for you? Like when you were watching it, hang for you? Gosh damn. God damn it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just going to shut up.
I don't think Glenn is the one that went through a big puberty moment in this episode. I think you're confusing that with someone else. But to answer your question, John, I honestly, straight up, definitely did not remember that.
Hang on. Glenn did go through a puberty moment. Did you not see that mustache on him?
Fair. But that means, I think that actually indicates, Will, that his moment happened a little bit prior.
He usually shaves it on Sunday nights, but, he had to write his paper. And, the paper that he didn't have time to write until he met up with Megan. And then he definitely hasn't been growing that for weeks, is what I'm saying.
I mean, I don't think... overall, I don't know if you really ever asked this. Like, truly, I don't really like this episode overall. Like... I do think that I see how they bring the storylines together at the end thematically, and it works. But it's just like, it's such a bummer of a storyline with Lane, obviously. It's like, you don't like Dawn setting it up. I could give still two shits about Glenn and Sally. So it's honestly just, yeah, not my favorite episode to consume, and was kind of a bummer to have to watch twice.
Well, have you considered one thing the episode has that none of the other episodes of Mad Men have up until this point, at least? Betty's sweater. I mean, you could land a plane.
Betty's sweater. That's super true. You know what? Fuck it. I'm back in, baby.
I
thought I was the fees, but now this is commission.
Yeah, I think I like this episode just because, like, every time I rewatch it, it's like an exercise in trying to understand, because it is such a British mentality that Lane has. And we might get into it, but there's so many little details that Jared Harris brought to the role in terms of really helping the writers understand like British pride a little bit more. And, they talk a little bit about that and just this idea of like why he would do this, why he would go to this length, why he would do it here. There's such a weird mechanical darkness to it, like down to him breaking his glasses and like, trying to fix a Jaguar while he holds up a monocle. I mean, it's just like, it's grotesque, but it's also like darkly comedic, and every time that's probably what I get out of the episode is like the psychology of it and Jared Harris's performance. I mean, what a performance to say goodbye to, right? And to exit the show on. So we'll get into all that stuff in more detail. I do want to bring up a fun fact, very fun. So the title, Commissions and Fees, does come from a real thing. Like this whole idea of commissions and fees was a 1960s industry shift where it was a shift between like commission-based and fee-based agency compensation. And again, Weiner has said, like, nobody in the writer's room fully understood it. I think they mentioned like Bob Levinson, one of their longtime like advisors, was the one who tried to explain it to them like over and over. And they just kind of kept laughing it off. So you kind of see that in the scene where Roger is like, so should we do that? Whatever it is, or like, like kind of playing to it. So they use that, they kind of use that as part of the boardroom scene. It's designed to kind of bore and mislead you. And you know what? To what Will was saying, it kind of showcases Lane's outsider status. That to him, he's like kind of excited as he's talking about it. He's like, oh, it's this really cool thing, and he's like getting a little pep in his step, and everybody else is kind of making fun of him a little bit instead of being like, wow, like that kind of thing. So there you go.
I mean, for one, you were talking about commissions, but fees? I hope they had that conversation at one point for Lane's benefit.
Yeah, and if not, they should commission it. Okay, so let's get into the office stuff that happens in the episode. We have Lane getting the 4-race thing, Bert finding the check, Dawn's ultimatum. It's kind of a quick sequence of stuff. Very quick pacing that kind of just walks you in through the episode. Kind of a question for me that I want you two to argue about. Was Dawn too harsh, in asking Lane to resign? This is something that obviously, if you ask Don, he'd be like, I'm doing the nice, most decent thing I can, which is letting you resign. Well, I'll start with you. I mean, what was your thought in the moment, and has it changed? Like, were you thinking like, bro, just chill out? Like, Lane is awesome.
No, I think there is a bluntness and a harshness to it, but I think in Don's heart of hearts, he wasn't trying to be mean per se. Like, I think he recognized the gravity of the situation, and as he said, it's a trust thing. Like, if you're embezzling money, that's an inherent distrust issue, and it's understandable that, like, he very easily, if he wanted to, could have brought in the authorities or somebody that, like I said, the professionals to handle it in a more stark or stricter tone. But yeah, I mean, I think he was trying to, in his own way, give Lane the like Don Draper treatment in the sense of like, you can use this to restart. Like, you can use this to, find a new path forward. And I feel like this episode, in a very direct and dramatic way, shows that like not everyone can be Don Draper and just restart. There are people who feel like they are tied to their identities in a very sort of consequential sort of way. And, Lane is someone who cannot help but be himself. He's never really been someone who can like worm his way out of situations, Not to say that Don Draper would have been smoother about embezzling money if he did something like that, but I think he could, maybe keep the pressure off a little bit more in a situation like this where it's like Lane's always sort of flop sweaty and someone who just can't really be the suave guy in the room, and
not as
that's
likable.
Just, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can think of another situation where Don's advice and solution was to suggest that they do what he did, and he tried to give them a fresh start and have
That's
them
easy.
restart.
My favorite, another character who loved to just hang out, and that was our buddy Adam Whitman. Whatever happened to him? I forgot.
Exactly. I mean, it's crazy it happens twice.
I actually thought David Carbonaro was, if I had a nickel for, I'd have 2 nickels. But I was actually wondering if David Carbonaro would use the same theme that he used for Adam in this episode, like when Don finds out about Lane. That doesn't happen, but he does use the theme, the music that he did when Lane was writing the check. And it's the same one when he's in his office, like with that snow falling. I thought that was a nice little touch, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly didn't even think about that with the Adam connection. And I should also note, I didn't like read anything about this episode going into it. Maybe like other works have connected that. But yeah, that's kind of just, it adds the intensity of Don's reaction to be sure that he's had to deal with this sort of situation twice with someone that he's viewed either as a brother or a peer. So yeah,
well,
for
you
sure,
could argue that's, sorry, I didn't know you were still talking. I was just going to say,
that was it.
I think you could read into that's why he does that thing with Glenn at the end of the episode, treating him like he feels like he should have treated Adam, teaching him how to drive, right? And it's like such a small thing in his mind, but to a kid, that's everything, and that's how Adam felt. And you hope that this is Don turning over a new leaf, but unfortunately, in case you forgot, it's Don Drape. Okay, but back to the original question, of course, was Don too harsh? And I think that's an interesting perspective, Will. Like, well, you mean, you brought up the whole thing about like, he is doing kind of the decent, like he could have done this investigation, but couldn't you argue that would be bad for the agency if this were to get out, right? If this were to get, because he even says that. So like technically he could have kept it a secret and whatever. I feel like it was more like, I want you out of here because I can't trust you. And I would be hard pressed to believe that it was kind of like the nicest thing just because like.
One thing I forgot to mention is that I think he even says this is that he wanted to keep Lane's dignity, which he recognizes as like a bigger thing for him, like this idea of like self-image and having this sort of British like ownership of identity. I think for me, that's where the like nicety, as it were, was coming in, is that like he's pretty blunt and straightforward, but he wanted to give Lane an out on his own terms, even if it wasn't real. Like he wanted to make it seem like Lane could leave on his own terms and maybe find his footing elsewhere.
Good point. Mike? You gotta be the arbiter, and
yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know if he was too harsh. Like, I think no matter who it was in the office, maybe besides, like, his secretary who he's banging, Or honestly, he'd probably fire Megan for the same thing. I think he does the same thing to everyone. I think it's not just because it's Lane. I think everybody would have gotten that treatment. And I do think it was the expectation of what should happen from Bert, who obviously is the one to identify it actually happening. In his sick and fucked up way, I do think Don thinks he's being helpful, and so that I think that also takes me away from saying he was too harsh. But then the thing that comes up is that, as always, he is the world's largest coward and is unable to see the three fingers pointing back at him as he's pointing to someone else about a terrible thing they did. So maybe there could be more compassion there, but brother just does not have it within him.
Yeah, it's like I think he's doing what he kind of needs to do. I think we can all agree with that. Like it's too risky to have Lane still work for the agency. They even mentioned in the commentary, like if a client finds out that somebody embezzled and still works there, I mean that's the end of the agency. So like Don does have his hands tied. You're right, Mike, with the Burt stuff. But I think at the same time, yeah, it's like, is there a way that he could have done it in a nicer way? I guess, but it's just, it's hard because
It's a nicer conversation than he just had with Peggy.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the rare episodes that Peggy/Elizabeth Moss is not in. That hasn't happened in a couple seasons, but yeah.
I was thinking about that because one kind of stark difference there is, as we mentioned, I think in that episode recap, is that I think Dawn does waver between the Dick and Dawn side in that, whereas when he's talking to Lane, I don't see Dick coming out. I think it's just Dawn.
That's what I was about to bring up. Yeah. I think it might come out in a flicker when Lane says, you don't know, do you realize like how the rest of us live? You know, because Dawn says like, I'll pay what you owe. And that's Dawn, that's Dawn being like, he's doing what he would do for Adam. He gave Adam $5,000. He'll give Lane $7,500 adjusted for inflation, right? However, in this moment, when he says that, Lane's pride gets in the way, and it's like you really like it creates this class warfare thing, and that's ironic because Don does know. Like he grew up in the Great Depression as Dick Whitman. Problem is Lane doesn't know him. He doesn't really know him, and it's like Don refusing to allow people to get close, even somebody that he had a lot of like one-on-one moments with, like season 4. Middle or I think it was early in the season, yeah, where he and Lane have their whole adventure on New Year's. And like that even adds to the tension, the tragedy, that ultimately Don has to carry this guilt that he obviously feels like his decision here that he felt like he needed to make is ultimately what drove Lane to his death. If he hadn't have done it, if Bert hadn't found out, if, whatever, all kinds of different things, then Lane would still be alive. And it makes you wonder.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think this episode does really, even down to that check, like the fact that he always sort of lived in some way or another, directly or indirectly, in Dawn's shadow. And I don't know, I just think this episode, one of the reasons I think it's really good and really compelling is that it just shows like people, who try to emulate Dawn can never be Dawn, for good or for ill, and in this case, obviously for ill. But yeah, I just think there's just something really fascinating about this episode, which is so integral to the idea of, identity and growth and people becoming, their evolved next level Pokemon selves, having to, kind of accept the dark consequences that come with that sometimes, and self-inflicted or not.
I think that's right. I think and what I appreciate about the episode is it makes it clear that it's not the money. It's not the $7,500. Is Don would have paid for it. No, it's the visa, really. It's the fact that Lane isn't just losing his job. Like he is losing a country. That's why you have that shot of the Statue of Liberty on his desk, like in the corner there. Love, by the way, the snow effect. And they talked about it a lot in the commentaries. It's a fun thing to nerd out about if you ever listen, but how they did it. And it's really cool. And like the snow like increases in speed from scene to scene anyway. But yeah, he's losing like his identity with this country. His whole American self was for him an escape. He was trying to get away from like British class structure. He was trying to get away from his father. He tried to get away from his wife, but she stuck around. Bless her. She's a lovely one. But not to him, I guess. That's where I stand. There was one other thing that I wanted to bring up. But Mike, is this why you don't like the episode? Is it this? Is it kind of like the muddiness of it? Or sorry, not like the episode as much.
No, I mean it is. It like I see the connected themes by the time we're done, but it's a less well executed version of things we've seen Mad Men do, where there's these seemingly separate storylines and character arcs that all come back to like this one big thing. So it's not my favorite.
Only other note I had on this, I think it is cool how because you both kind of brought up the fact that like Don is trying to be Don, and he assumes that everybody has like a hidden second identity sort of waiting in the wings. But I don't think Lane does. I think what it's trying to say is like Lane already became the person that he wanted to be. And so when Don says the next thing will be better, like sure, to Don, that's true. He means it sincerely. But for Lane, he knows that's not going to happen. He's going to go back to a place that he can't really be himself. And it's what makes that statement unintentionally lethal.
I mean, one thing I don't think we really touched on that I find really fascinating from a symbolic standpoint is initially he was going to kill himself in the Jaguar, which is a British car. So he was going to do it the like classic British way, and it failed. So he, I guess in an indirect way, did the more American way in the American office, and did it with his peers, like looking, in the other corner and the other walls. And I don't know, I just think there's a lot to dive into that. I don't know if it's worth exploring, but it just adds to the metatextual aspect of it. And just this idea of like whether, whether or not he was doing it by choice or not, it's like he died an American rather than a British man. So it's like, even though he went about it in a very British way, it was still a very American death.
Yeah, good point. Another fun fact for you all. So in the commentary, Jared Harris actually said he was the one who raised the visa problem with Weiner. And so Weiner, like I mentioned before, told him kind of how the arc was going to come together a couple of episodes early. And then Harris gave a note that was essentially like, you can't go back to England having failed like that. I think it was like almost exactly what he said. And so Weiner also, he brought up that he took it on himself personally to deliver the news to Jared Harris that he wasn't going to be in the show anymore. And he was like, that's part of the job. And he was like, I'm sure that can't be fun. I vaguely remember Brian Batt must have gone through the same thing with Sal, and
There's a carryover from Sopranos, because that's what happened with David Chase. He would, whenever a character is about to die, and obviously that happened more often in Sopranos because people were getting whacked and stuff all the time.
Especially in that last season. Yeah.
Right.
They were like, oh yeah, sure, whatever you said. It's the last season. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. He would just like kind of politely like invite them to lunch or dinner or something and be like, okay, just so you know, in the next episode or two, your character is going to die. So it sounds like he took that on from, his mentor, David Chase, it seems.
That's the right thing to do, I think, when you're the leader.
You know what I did like in this episode, though, was the really, really great acting in the aftermath of everything. I was like, on this second rewatch, I was really, really impressed with just the weight of the situation. Yeah, particularly with basically everybody but John Hamm, who obviously is playing it, I think, more reserved for a reason.
I actually thought, Vincent Kartheiser did really well in like the whole scene, like the whole moment when they discover the body, when he sees it, some of his visual acting, like he had chops in this one. And then like, he's kind of like, we're not supposed to disturb the body, all that stuff. Oh, and I wanted to bring up, so apparently, according to the commentaries, there was a writer's room debate over, whether or not Lane could have played this differently. So both commentaries, they talk about this a lot and basically say like, did he have a chance? Like, what could he have said to talk himself out of this? Should he have been more contrite from the get-go? Would that made it, did the anger, little outburst he had, did that seal it for him? But yeah, I think ultimately everyone kind of agrees that like, yeah, there's probably nothing he could have said, that would have changed Don's mind. Like, I think that unless he had some kind of magical excuse that made sense, I don't think it was happening.
I mean, it's like what Don said, like this goes all the way back to him not addressing it earlier. He's like, well, why don't you just come and say something? And the answer just comes down to more than the money issue. It's a pride issue. And not only in the sense of like, he was too embarrassed to ask, for that amount of money, but like also he felt like he was owed that money before, and like the sense of like he felt like entitled to it, and that I don't think that added to the case much more than it would have.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. Another fun fact here. So they talk about how Burt Cooper discovering the check wasn't an accident at all of the plot. It's the whole reason they do the whole fee versus commission subplot. It gave him a mechanism to basically be like, who else in that office would open a bank statement or look at the books? Like, what would actually cause that? And so they were like, oh, I guess it would be Burt Cooper. And this kind of like harebrained thing. I do think it's kind of interesting that they bring on the Jaguar account, and that kind of prompts Burt Cooper to get off his butt. Like, he's done more this season in general, we should say, for reasons that I think are interesting. He has more of an appetite than he maybe had like in years prior. And then the last one I have before we move on, can I please talk about the practical snow just a little bit? I'll be quick. I love it. I think it's so fun. I'll tell you how they did it.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay. So
wait, I've seen the Grinch. I know how snow works.
Okay, Fargo. Okay, so the snow is entirely practical. So they had these barrels rigged above the windows, dropping the artificial flakes. And so they were able to like adjust the density from scene to scene, which is what makes it get progressively heavier across the episode. And then they saved the heaviest they possibly could do it, where you have the Lane Jones scene and then Lane going to his office. And then they had to do like the wide shot there. And they specifically wanted to make Lane very small in the center of the frame with the snow falling on his head like Ash. And with the Statue of Liberty, oh, it's just such a good shot. And it's an underrated shot. People don't talk about it enough.
Yeah, no, I was really, and I like the old fashioned, I know this is obviously in the 60s, but it kind of reminds me of the 50s, like almost like a Douglas Sirk, All the Heavens Allows. Like there's that scene where like the snow's falling in the cabin and you see it. I don't know, it's like an old fashioned kind of quality that I really liked.
I will say AV Club is Team Mike on this episode, at least when it comes to this, because there was a complaint in the AV Club review of this from Emily St. James that the machinery of it was too visible, that the writers are kind of steering you toward a pre-selected emotional response. Yeah, Mike, you're not alone. I want you to know that. I mean, we may not agree with you, but Will and I are here for you.
I mean, my middle name is also James, so shout out.
Okay, so let's get to the weekend part of the episode. This involves Rebecca getting the Jaguar, the failed suicide attempt. Don is kind of, he has that immediate reaction to Lane basically being like, the fact that he didn't have the money to do this, and Don feeling like he's part of the reason they don't have those Christmas bonuses. If he had gotten off his ass and done more work, instead of being happy with his wife, then Lane would still work there. Is I think his rationale. And he's like, I don't want Dunlop tires, the account that Pete brings up. He's like, I want Firestone. He's like, why don't we get Dow Chemical, all this stuff. Very effective. You're going to say, well, you leaned into the mic, Will. We all know you were going to say something. You were going to make a little joke.
No, I wasn't saying anything. Sorry.
Well, it's similar. I mean, I can say it for it. It's like similar to some restrictions John has. Will can't talk about Dow Chemicals because he's very involved with Dow Chemicals in ways that are just very secret.
So Rebecca Price, she buys Lane a Jaguar.
Just love how you yes and. You're just so good at it. You're just such an amazing. Wow, that was a really good one.
Yeah, Will, what was running through your head when you saw the racing green Jaguar and the vomiting promptly after?
I feel like in a weird way, this made my heart sink more than the actual death, because I feel like the death was sort of foreshadowed throughout the episode, as we mentioned, but just something about how, just sort of blithely unaware his wife is, but still very supportive and sweet, and like feeling that this is like a big major turning point for not only him, but them as a couple. I just feel like, I don't know, in a weird way. And also just the fact that one of the things I find kind of haunting about this episode is that we never find out like how she learns about his death. Like it's just something that's left, I guess, ambiguous. Maybe it's touched upon in the next episode. I don't know, but there's just like that sort of unresolved closure. Not that I need to see it, but it just kind of leaves her story left ambiguous, considering everything she's gone through to kind of make this marriage and relationship work against the odds.
It's not addressed in the next episode. I don't think I'm spoiling it there, but they did do a limited like made for TV movie. That was it's like a sequel to Weekend at Bernie's, where it's called Life in the Fast Lane.
Yeah, subtitled, Sometimes the Price Isn't Right.
That'd be amazing if there was like some account they forgot that Lane wasn't part of, and they're like, they're expecting Lane for this. And then they have, him coming up Weekend at Bernie's style into the, they put a scarf on him to hide the neck burns and all that stuff. It's just like, he gets chilly.
There'd be a tea party scene, but then it's like all the Americans don't know the proper form or like manners for a tea party. Man, it just writes itself.
He's wearing like a racing scarf, and they're like, jolly ho, talk about life in the fast lane, innit?
See, you did it, dude. That was a good yes and. You're getting better.
Weiner calls the car failing to start the greatest joke the show has ever done. He said it took 5 or 6 episodes of setup. He was hoping that the audience would completely forget about that. Like when he gets to the Jaguar, not think like as soon as he's setting up the car, the people are going to assume, right? Like, oh, it's not going to start. And yeah, it just comes at the most devastating possible dramatic moment. And it's completely true to the car. Christopher Manley said that whenever anyone tells him it's their favorite part of the episode, His answer is that's in the script. I know, Will, you already touched on it that something about this scene definitely got to you a little bit.
I think more than anything, it's just the glasses, him holding one lens, just trying to figure this car out. Like, not even really mad about it, just like trying to mechanically just figure this whole situation out. Yeah, it is very darkly funny to me. On an unrelated note,
oh yeah,
I did when I was talking to my friend earlier today, he was telling me that apparently there is a Waymo Jaguar that he saw,
wow.
And I did not know that could be a thing.
Come to San Francisco, you'll see one eventually.
They're all Jaguars, aren't they?
Are they all?
I don't
really?
I don't know.
I am
I'll look it up.
99% positive.
I thought they were all Teslas for the most part.
None of them are Teslas.
No.
Because it's competing. It's like competing technology.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing somebody say
they have vans
Jaguar.
now too.
Huh?
Waymo has vans now too, but the regular cars are like the stock model is a Jaguar.
I'm just seeing Jaguar as the one. I'm not seeing any other cars here. Right? I don't want to say that definitively, but it looks like Jaguar is the main.
Well,
for Waymo.
I guess that explains why so many of them have had trouble over the years.
Yeah, there's some funny jokes. It looks like there are going to be a couple new ones that they are going to do Hyundai Ioniq 5 models soon, apparently, but I don't know. That doesn't look like an official source to me. Anyway, all right. So what were we talking about? Yeah, I was going to bring up at this point, Will, did you think that maybe Lane's not going to go through with it? Like maybe this is like the episode's way of saying, you know what? Maybe Lane's not going to kill himself. Maybe he's going to, this is his second chance, right? That's going to change his mind. Did that run through your mind?
I mean, maybe to an extent. Like I feel like there was a part of me that was like, because, Lane's someone who doesn't have as strong a will as maybe others. But I think there was just something about, as you mentioned, John, there just the way that he went about it pretty coldly and clinically the first time. Like if I think if there was more second guessing or doubt in his emotions or his expressions, I would have been more like, maybe this isn't going to happen. But I don't know. It just seemed like too predestined in Lane's mind for unfortunate reasons.
When he breaks the glasses, Jared Harris explained that he's worn them his whole life and he hates them. So that's why he breaks them. And I think that it's kind of a nice touch of like, it kind of shows that he hates himself. And it's a big reason why he just can't stand living anymore. Because he feels like he can't be who he really is. And the glasses kind of resemble that. Like it's something that he can't control. It's something, I mean, unfortunately, like contacts, I don't think have become a thing yet, at least commercially. But and apparently production had to score and test a lot of real glasses to get them break cleanly at the center. So that was kind of cool, I thought.
You know whose glasses also fall off right before he dies in a way that you could argue is suicide. Albus Dumbledore.
Wow, that was a dig for water, and you got some.
I was just gonna say that there is something kind of tragic, comedic, and sad about him going to the office, and you see that the glasses are kind of taped together in a nerdy kind of way.
I mean, it's just like, doubling down on like he was a bit of a dork in the office too. Yeah. There was the Lane Jones scene we kind of jumped past a little bit. So they originally wrote that as a goodbye, and even as like a plea for her to run away with him. And they instead rewrote it as him insulting her, mainly because he's so angry about the situation, and then he would rather she hate him when he's gone than pity him. And I think there's a cut line from the end of that scene that was to the effect of like, I'm going to miss you more than I know. But they dropped it in the edit because they were worried it was going to tip the hand a little too early. But do you think they should have kept that in the episode?
Definitely. I think at this point, I'm over writers being like, what would a dude do to his dog? Maybe we should do that to Joan. You know what I mean? Like it's like, I'm going to be mean to him, so he runs away and goes and lives a great life.
Right.
Make this a little easier.
Like he walks Joan all the way to the front of the building, opens the door,
that
says, "Go on, get
sexually harassed in your room."
Yeah, well, that's exactly what Mike's saying.
I know you're referring to Chauncey, but just like the idea of like, we were just, I don't know. Well, I don't know where I'm going with this.
I just feel like I'm saying like that's a trope of like, I'm going to be mean to this thing, so it's easier when I'm gone.
Yeah. The old yeller kind of thing. Not to compare Joan to an animal, even though she's a beast of a partner so far. And Scarlett is doing a heck of a job taking her place. She just needs to get the Danish next time.
That's the other, I appreciate that's like the next progression, like Joan no longer is like having to lead the meeting. She's just in the meeting, like her contemporary is sort of almost like a daughter figure in a way, like she's like kind of nurturing the next generation. Yeah, I think there's some interesting thematic stuff that's going on.
Sorry, quick fact check. Earlier, I said that Carbonara reuses the same music cue for Lane in his office. Sorry, it was when he was getting into the Jaguar. I just realized him getting in the Jaguar is the same cue for when he wrote the check. So apologies.
Oh my god, thank God he got that corrected. They would have killed you in the comments.
Carbonara himself would have sent me a few angry text messages. I know that. Weiner's favorite non-ending image in the hour is the sugar shot in the cafe. So Manley explained that he shot it as an insert pickup on the final day of shooting, where the sugar is falling deliberately to echo the snow. Now, obviously, when Will saw this episode and was texting our group chat, his reaction to Sally pouring sugar into coffee like a child was that it might be poison. So, Will, let's talk about Sally.
Yeah, I mean, what you're referring to is the fact that Sally, having had a clean streak for a little while, returns to her life of crime and commits arguably the perfect crime by faking Lane's death and actually killing him for slighting her father out of money. And, you know, we have this whole scene where she comes to the apartment having overheard her dad and stepmom complaining about the money. When she finds out that she no longer has to go to school on Monday, the plan was hatched. She would have a perfect alibi, a mild-mannered Glenn going to the museum, seeing all these dead bodies all over the wall, and just...
She spotted fleeing museum with blood on her.
It truly is like a generational Will run in the chat. And then his button, you gotta his button to all of it is, man, these showrunners love to lay it on thick.
Just saying that they're, showing... her pouring this like acidic looking thing over Lane's body, it's a little, not especially subtle, but very artistic.
The rant goes on. You texted about this for 15 minutes. I just looked at the timestamps.
It was great. I loved it. I wanted more. At a certain point, I was a little worried that it felt a little forced, but that's fine. Yeah, I forgot to bring this up. There's a fun little unscripted moment in the episode where Harris says that like the real life Jared Harris was fumbling, dropping his keys at the door. That actually is how it happened. And so the executive producer, Scott Hornbacher, who we brought up, of course, said he saw it in the dailies and he insisted they use that shot. And then they locked Manley into doing that one take. So I thought that was really cool. And it's kind of similar to, because like Soddery has said that, with directing, sometimes you go with something that went wrong because you can't tell in the moment what the edit is going to need. So I thought that was really cool. And I didn't mention, there were two location things I wanted to bring up. So Manley said that the restaurant that they went to is a French place in LA, and it's the location that doubles as the same building as Lane's barbershop meeting the diner meeting, at the top of the hour with the barbershop scene. Now the barbershop scene, they used a bunch of like memorabilia from this like real life person. Cool stuff. A lot of fun little extra details there since they had a couple of new sets in this one. But sorry, yes, back to the Sally stuff. So Mike, you kind of touched on this earlier.
I just, one last thing I forgot to mention is that I think the fact that Lane died in the office was meant to send a pretty harsh and violent message to the rest of the office that they try to do anything like this, they know what's coming for them.
Okay. So Mike, I know as somebody who was, a little harsher on this episode, what was your takeaway of like how it tries to weave the Lane stuff with the Sally part of the episode? We talked a little bit about how it relates, of course, to Dawn and Roger trying to get Dow and everything. But what about the Sally stuff, where she decides she doesn't want to go on the ski trip, rebels from her mom, comes a woman, hangs out with Megan. Megan gets pissed off because, it's like, doesn't want to be a stepmom without any notice, all that stuff.
Sorry, is your question, how does it relate to the Lane stuff?
Or like, did you feel like it wasn't able to do it, very gracefully? And was that like an issue for you?
I feel like it in itself, I didn't find a big connection, but what it does is it sets up Glenn being around for then Dawn to have that moment. So it felt like one of the dominoes that needed to fall, and like still has an interesting presence, I guess you could say, if you care about Sally as a person, which I don't. But then, yeah, I don't. I think at the end of the day, you can just talk about how the phases of life are a circle. So we're seeing a woman at the beginning of hers while we're seeing a man at the end of his. I don't know, but that feels pretty fucking boring.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned like the logistics of getting to the end of the episode with Glenn. Yeah, Wider literally brings that up. He was like, it was such a puzzle because like that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to set it up so that Glenn would be in this situation, that he would be in the apartment, that he would be doing any of this. And so, yeah, Mike, you nailed it. 10
It
out of
was
10.
such a puzzle to figure out how to get my boy another check.
Exactly. He says a lot of nice things about his son, who plays Glenn, of course, in the episode. The period storyline, I should mention, originated with Maria Jacquemin herself, one of the writers. She said that the idea that Sally would get her period and want her mother would kind of reframe a lot of the toxic stuff between her and Betty throughout this entire year of the show of season 5. And Manley said that this bathroom scene was the hardest scene in the episode for him to direct, as you can imagine. He was openly asking Maria on set what the experience is actually like and what Sally would say and all of that. Then Weiner kind of talks about how he wanted to be explicit that the beat shouldn't feel traumatic necessarily, that it's just she's in the worst possible place, not knowing what to do, and she just wants her mom. And it's like an interesting reconciliation. Did that land for you though, Will? First time viewer, like I assume, once you saw that she was feeling a little sick, were you getting suspicious?
No, I mean, I kind of just figured that's what this was leading to. I was way more concerned with having to see a potential sex scene between Sally and Glenn. I was like, please, my God, I do not want to see that at all. Don't lead that. I don't want to see this. And so
the way you phrased in the group chat was way more alarming. Like, I don't want Glenn to go to Pound Town with Sally. Like, dang, Will.
I mean, I that is true. I don't want to see him anywhere near Pound Town.
With anyone.
With anyone.
Except maybe that senior Anderson. There's a spark there. I can feel it.
Yes, but I think that the scene, as far as the bathroom sequence goes, is handled pretty delicately. Like, I didn't feel like it was false. I don't know. It's one of those tricky things that I was wondering how they were going to handle it, and I feel like it addresses it with care and, like you said, with some sense of due diligence as far as the woman's perspective goes. So it was just nice to see the rare moment where Betty and Sally are like nice to each other for once.
Yeah. She's so mean in the beginning. Mike, I have a question for you then. Okay. I'm gonna pitch this for you. You can tell me if I can go to hell.
I'm sorry. Yeah? I was just going to say, I had to refill my drink when that scene was happening, the one you're talking about where Betty is yelling at Sally. And as I paused HBO Max, an ad for the screen for Plan B came up.
Yeah.
And
she can sleep with a doorman for all I care.
Yeah.
Plan B is available.
Right. I thought that was just so brilliant. And there was another moment, and it wasn't quite as good, but like when Lane was like squirmishly, I think it was when he was talking with Christina Hendricks. He was like, I paused it and Hellman's mayonnaise came up on the screen. It's just like, do the best.
If there's any show that's going to have good advertisements, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Exactly, I'll take that over the AI ads I got last time.
But no, sorry. The question I had, why am I apologizing? The question I had for Mike was, okay, so this is the pitch. So a way to tie the storylines together. So Betty's advice to Sally is essentially, hey, if this happens again, ask another woman. Lane's entire tragedy is that when he needs help, he doesn't ask anyone. He feels like he can't. Is the episode drawing that line on purpose, or am I desperate?
John, the male loneliness epidemic started way earlier than the 50s,
There you go.
I would say it probably started, as early as, with my man Odysseus, who was so lonely on those harrowed seas. But
that reminds me of Lane's best line in the entire show. We're not homosexuals, we're divorced.
A while ago, right? Like that was
season 4.
Yeah. It is worth pointing out that this episode was written by a married couple.
Yeah, I wonder what that's about.
A man and a woman, yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that they were straight.
Yeah, Will's like, I don't want to get hated.
Really?
No, we were talking about the difference between the male and woman perspective. That's why I pointed it out.
A couple quick facts, fun facts. So Kieran Shipka's staging the entryway wasn't fully planned. She actually stepped down a step and then stopped. They liked how it looked because the coverage of the shot made Glenn Reed as much taller than her. And then Manley had a retroactive reading where he's saying like, yeah, you know what? She hasn't matured as much as Glenn has. It's the first time they're seeing each other in a long time. So it's this big reunion. And the voice change and the mustache almost kind of read as like a little threatening to her, probably. I think my take on this, and I'm curious what you guys think, because there's a little bit of an awkwardness. We're in the museum, they're talking it like in a way that's like very like kid-like. I get the sense that both of them are going into this situation not sure if there's going to be sexual attraction. I think they're both aware that that's possible, but when they see each other, they don't feel sexually attracted to each other. That's how I read it. That's how I don't know if that's what the show means, but I don't get the sense that like they want to sleep together at all or have like a crush on each other, but they have like a deep friendship. But I don't know. Am I wrong?
I mean, I think in classic Glenn fashion, he's already viewing her as his future stepkid. You know, he has his
There
eyes
you
set
go.
somewhere else.
Yeah, that's right. You agree, Will? Disagree?
No, I think that's pretty on point.
Well, all right. What else we have here? We've covered most stuff. Yeah, Will, I was going to ask you about
I mean,
the Dow thing.
I would
Mhm.
say, though, with Glenn, as I mentioned to you guys in the group chat, I think there was a big missed opportunity in the last scene where you have, Dawn offering to give Glenn a ride home. He's like, if you could have anything you'd want, what would it be? And it just goes for the boring, like, okay, he's letting him drive the car. But when they cut to Glenn, I was hoping they'd really, like cowboy hat, big wheel of cheese, blow up doll in the back, porno magazines on the radiator, another like a sex worker in the back, just the whole, a barn animal in the back, in the trunk.
I wish the shot just panned on him with a mother who cared.
Nice. Yeah.
Helen of Troy. It's Helen Bishop. So we get to Don and Roger at Dow and how all that stuff kind of comes across. I mean, bear strokes. Good pitch? Bad pitch? What was your take? Mike, obviously you're a guy who likes to pitch. They call you the pitch bitch, obviously, especially in the comments. What was your evaluation of his Dow pitch?
Yeah, good pitch. Best Don pitch we've had in a while, and it's because why? Everything else is fucking going to shit. And when is Don at his best? When the world is on fire.
And he's depressed. He walked by the protest outside the building about the napalm and was like, everything sucks. I'm gonna use that. Did you like it, Will? I mean, you're kind of nodding, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, initially I was a little like, it's a bit aggressive, but considering how much I feel like even the better Don pitches this season have been him sort of in auto drive, it was nice to see a little bit of blood in the works. And even, we even had Roger point that out. It's just like, wipe the blood off your lips or something along those lines. After the I just seemed like he was hungry again. And I like that, it's a little bit more raw. It doesn't feel as polished. It feels like he's kind of going for the kill in that sense. And yeah, I liked it in that respect for sure.
I do think he gets a good read, like a pulse on the moment, though. Like his whole thing about like happiness and moments and then that being fleeting, things like that. Like they are in a time right now that is, as we know, looking back, and the show is already showing, like, just feels like it's going to get bleaker and bleaker and bleaker with Vietnam and everything that's going to happen politically. And so people are looking for happiness, you know what I mean? And I do think a lot of Don's great pitches are kind of centered on this longing, because that's what he ultimately has in the whole of his heart. That's the wheel moment.
Well, the pilot.
It's always, yeah.
He says what he says in the pilot. Happiness is a moment before you need more happiness. Episode 1, smoke in your eyes.
So it's like that's his wheelhouse. You know what I mean? And I do think he has like a good read. That's what people respond to.
I do want to say, I mean, I do think it's interesting. Like, I feel like a lot of that anger is him channeling his frustration with Lane, of telling Lane, like, why would you accept what you have? Why, like, you should just let yourself lose everything. Start over with this new business, start over with new whatever. Like, why would you be content? And I think it's just like repulsive almost to Don that Lane is like, would rather stay at this place than accept that he can go somewhere else and make a go of it as you were. His philosophy is just so like destructive. It's like such a reflection of, I think, like the worst of capitalism, of like, it's like a never ending appetite. You're just never going to actually be happy. Don's philosophy really only works for whoever holds power. And he just doesn't see it. Weiner did say that this pitch was meant to make you feel sick, to see Don as greedy, to have like a bloodlust, hence that line about Roger being taken aback. He says he was surprised that audiences enjoyed it as much as they did. His read on why was that, Megan had just hurt him earlier, so the audience wants the old Don back badly enough to cheer for a man selling napalm, is how he put it. So there you go.
It's weird that he would point out the Megan thing when really it's more of the emasculation that he received from Bert, I would think, not so much the Megan aspect.
I'm sure he sees it maybe as like cumulative, right?
It's just weird,
I think if he wanted the audience mad, they should have used a different thing from the first episode, and they should have been with napalm. They're toasted.
The enemy is toasted.
That's a good one.
Speaking of, the napalm speech is it's close to a direct quote from Frank Pearson, who drew on his own World War II experience, where he said, when we needed it, it worked. Also, the Dow offices were shot at, they are supposed to be in like Rockefeller Center, is where it says. I don't think they said exactly where it was shot, and that there was a real protest presence outside Dow over napalm at the time. So they did get like a nice little, they were able to get that in there. that realistic accuracy in a way that serves the show. Manly's read on this whole thing was that they're testing Dawn. Are you going to take out a full page ad in the Times about us and all that? But of course, Roger prepped for this. Like, even Roger is kind of like turning up the dial, where he's just like, I don't want to talk about that letter. Or I think Dawn says that. Roger backs him up. I forget exactly, but yeah.
Love to see it. And then again, that's why you can't be mad at Don the Scene. Like, first off, I don't think I'm ever not on Don's side, essentially. Don fucking Draper. But to see the boys getting the band back together and fire, and like they're playing all the hits, yeah, I'm on board.
We're running low on time, but I did want to quickly touch on Ken. So we did have the meeting where Roger, even makes Ken wait for 20 minutes, kind of like the whole Ed Baxter thing where they made them wait. But he has the meeting with Ken about like they're going to go after Dow and everything. It's an interesting conversation because Ken kind of sticks up for himself. It's fun to contrast it with the conversation Roger has with Ken a few seasons ago where he's like, hey, stop writing short stories, focus on your job, which was also a reenactment of my life. But anyway, just kidding, of course, obviously. But yes, so like you can tell like both of them know like what the conversation is. My question for you, Will, is like, because Ken does stick up for himself and he handles the situation better. Do you think it's because he's like growing a spine, or do you think he's always kind of just been this way and we hadn't really seen it yet? Or do you think he just burned from like what Peggy said to him about his stories and he's just like, you know what, I'm done?
I feel like he just keeps kind of getting pushed down and down. So, he kind of just felt like he was either in a fight or flight sort of situation. Like even Dawn said, like if Ken doesn't like it, you fire him. So I think he kind of knew like, well, either I got to, restart or I got to kind of take ownership of it. And he's like, fine, I'm taking some ownership of it. He's like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then he's like, oh, by the way, fuck Pete. And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. It's like, well, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, so when they get to the thing where Joan finds the body, which is kind of wild, it's the episode right after her own body has become capital for the firm, not exactly subtle. But Weiner said that Christina Hendricks' choice and how to play it shocked him in the dailies because to him it came off like she knows exactly what's wrong and is performing like being okay, which is what a person would usually do. And then Manley kind of reinforces like he had the same notion in the separate commentary. I was curious though because I didn't pick up on that. I thought she was just genuinely like confused. But do you think which do you all think is right?
I think she had an idea of what was going to happen, but didn't want to assume the worst.
Like she couldn't accept it.
Well, I think, she just didn't want it to be true.
I think Joan's a smart woman. I think a lot of Joan's life is recognizing the actions and intentions, like future intentions of men, and being like a quiet observer or not commenting on it. So I'd be surprised if she didn't have some inclination, or I find myself more on the commentary side of, she was playing it off. I just think that's how Joan's wired. She's still like a little bit more old school that way, like the generation before her, who maybe like never spoke up, because she obviously will speak up from now and then, but she's just a good read, especially with men.
I mean, I think the fact that she breaks down as soon as it's confirmed that like the other guys confirm it suggests that I think she just didn't want it to be true. I don't know. That's my take on it.
Unfortunately, this whole scenario does come from a true story, very sadly. There was someone who did hang themselves in an office around this time in a building just like this. In that case, it actually wasn't discovered for roughly a day because nobody happened to need them. I mean, it's just like, it's so sad. It's so tragic. And then Weiner tied that directly to Lane's humiliation, that it wouldn't have mattered if it took all day. So, and in this case, it didn't. It's like kind of well into the morning, it looks like, or, enough time has passed that, Don and Roger had their meeting, had a drink and came back. Now, Will, you did bring up, you brought up how much you liked the practical stuff for the body. So I'll real quick, they did use a cable rig for how they did this. They removed it digitally. They had to do a whole bunch of research into like getting the rigor timing of everything right, the color and the level of the neck bruising. They talked about it a lot. Harris said he had to stay rigid and motionless for most of the day. In between takes, he kept breaking into always look on the bright side of life in order to like lighten the mood, which I thought was very nice.
Very British.
Yep. Weiner referenced a specific painting for the shot of the partners with the body, and that was Mantegna's Lamentation of Christ. And then Weiner defended showing the body. He said that it was contested at the time. Not everybody agreed, but he felt like the audience had to know a certainty that Lane had died and that Don had to have that moment. There are times when I rewatch this and I wonder if they're going to like edit it out, to be honest. But so far that just hasn't happened. But then we end with the drive, Glenn in the drive. And I don't have much to say about this, except I think it ties the episode really well together.
I'm sorry.
I think Don, yeah.
I gotta say, like, as if the audience didn't know, like, what did they think was gonna happen? Like, he was gonna pull the door and he's like, surprise! You guys were on
He
prank
beats
wars.
up Pete again.
He is an American, you know?
Right.
He's just the original
Just
Logan
cold
Paul, I guess.
cocks Pete again.
Round 2.
But I do like how the episode ends. I think it ends on a sweet note. You know, it's a song that sounds happy but has really sad lyrics, which I think is fitting. And we already kind of mentioned it, but was there anything else you guys wanted to add?
Nope.
I'll do that. Yeah, there's a bit more trivia, but I think that's about a good place.
I'm gonna, in Lane fashion, finish my drink off to him. To Lane. You
To
died.
Lane.
You died as you lived, hanging by a thread.
Just hanging around. No more Lane. We'll see what happens in the next episode. Next episode is called either Phantom or The Phantom. Let me just, The Phantom. So that will be the season 5 finale. Guys, we've almost made it to the end of season 5, and after that, we'll only have 2 seasons left to go. Can you believe it? I sure can.
Madman. It's mad.
Man.